many are still grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective Podcast, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm your host and president of Jigsaw Queensland, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating and not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. You'll often hear us at Jigsaw speak of the lifelong issues of adoption. How we feel about our experience or where we find ourselves in our lives can vary greatly over the passage of time. Today's guest, Tracy Shand, is an adopted person who has undergone many transitions in her adoption story and her life since we last spoke to her on the 22nd of June, 2022. And we welcome her back today to share more of her story and updates. When we last spoke, Tracy had put her life on pause to live in Launceston, Tasmania for 9 months while completing her honours in psychology. She had also reunited with both her mother and more recently her father through a genealogical DNA test. If you haven't already, I'd recommend listening to her previous episode before this one. A lot's changed for Tracy since then. She has now completed her Masters of Clinical Psychology and is practicing as a psychologist in New South Wales. She's also experienced significant personal and adoption-related changes. Welcome back to Adopt Perspective, Tracy.
Hi, Jo. Nice to talk with you again.
Tracy, so much has happened in your life since we last spoke that it's kind of difficult to even know where to begin. But I do recall that you were living in student accommodation in Tasmania in Launceston while working on your honours degree, and you've now completed it and your Masters. So congratulations. Can you share with us what you were doing prior to this qualification and what led you to decide to study psychology?
Yeah, so prior to studying psychology, I'd been a church pastor for around 25 to 30 years. But after my adoption reunion, I found a growing interest in psychology, adoption reunion, and all of that. And then when we got to lockdowns in Melbourne in 2020, I went, okay, I'm bored. I need something to do. So I enrolled in a course with UNE just to see how it went and loved it. So, yeah, that's how my journey started.
COVID was responsible for a lot of people switching gears.
Definitely.
Can you give us an update on your relationships with your biological parents?
Yeah, so it's doing really well. My son actually got married in Brazil last year to a lovely Brazilian girl he met while working in the US. And both my mother and my father came with us on that family trip. There were 10 of us on that trip. And like, good on my mother, particularly, with all the shame and stuff associated with my adoption. She sucked that up in service of being there for my kids and particularly my son as he was getting married. And so we traveled around Chile and Brazil together as one big family, and they both got on fine. They had a great time together, and it was just wonderful for me to have them both there.
That's good.
And for my son.
I'm glad you mentioned how it was for you. I was wondering how it all went for you because it can be a lot and overwhelming to have all of these people come together in one spot.
Yeah, no, it was probably 80% good. There were one or two occasions which were not so great, but overall it was great. It was wonderful.
It's excellent. So you've undergone some other significant life changes in the past couple of years. Can you tell us about these transitions?
Yeah, so in 2018, around the time where I did find my father through DNA testing, I also got diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. Fortunately, touch wood, cancer free, very early stage. But when you're faced with an illness, um, and initially I didn't know how serious it was. You start to think about life a lot more. And that started me down the journey of questioning where my life was at. Previous to that diagnosis, I had been chronically stressed since around, I don't know, 2014, 20, sorry, not 2014, 2004 or so. We went through a major transition, leaving one church, going to another, starting another church. And all of that had sort of built up in my body such that, I was just finding it hard to sleep. I was scratching myself. I was just, on the go all the time. I had my daughter in 2005. She was premature because of what's called HELP syndrome, and I've since found out that that can be caused by stress. That's a factor. And so it just gave me pause, as well as COVID, to just really think about my life, whether the beliefs I had when I was at university still fit. I started down the journey of reading about deconstruction of Christianity, went and saw a counselor who had deconstructed her faith. A few things didn't add up for me. I saw good people suffering some terrible things. So I went on a journey of cancer treatment, also deconstruction. And after finding my family, like I'd find my father reunited with my mother, that also brought up questions of identity. Is my identity as a pastor true to who I really am now that I've met both parents? My father is a chemistry teacher. My original degree was science. And so I was getting this pull back to science, a pull away from the church, the simplicity of beliefs that I held in my 20s. And so that's why I tipped my feet into doing psychology, and basically me sort of leaving the church pastorate now, and trying to reconstruct my faith outside of fundamentalist Christianity. And that was a journey initially to atheism. But then I've kind of got a bit of equilibrium back. I'm not quite sure what I believe now, but I think I'm okay with that. It's okay to not know everything, and it's a journey, right? And so I went and heard Elizabeth Gilbert in a workshop a couple of weeks ago, and she was talking about the universe and things happen. And all I can say is my psychology journey, I believe, has been guided somehow. I'm amazed at how far I've got and how each step I feel has been guided in some way. So yeah, also that shifted my marriage. Obviously, my husband still works for the church full time. All of my children, two of my children still attend the church. And so that's been quite difficult. We've gone through some counselling. The fact I've been away studying has meant a change has come in our relationship dynamic. So at the moment we're separated, and it just feels like we're going in different directions, and that often happens in midlife, particularly with women who've raised the kids and been married, and I wanted nothing more than to get married and have a family when I was in my 20s, and I've done that. I love my kids to bits. I'm so proud of them, but they're all adults.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a time for me to explore my identity and who I am. And I am so happy with that. But there's also a bit of mummy guilt and, working out what the future holds. It's still not completely nailed down. But again, like my faith, living in tension is okay. It's okay not to have all the answers and to be all right with that. And so I'm in this kind of interesting grey zone at the moment.
Wise words to do with adoption. Like, if I had to pin down the one big takeaway I've had from my adoption experience, it would be that I always wanted the answers. I wanted an end point and to feel better and to know that that was done with. Now, I do not like open ends. And
Yes.
I've had to come to peace with the fact that I will never have that and be okay with that and know that it's lifelong and it will go up and down. And sometimes I feel like I got it together and sometimes I won't.
Yeah.
Something else you said really resonated for me, and that's when we're in big periods of transition in our lives, how we can go from one end to almost an extreme opposite end in how we think about things, and then how sometimes that needle then comes back to settle somewhere in the middle, and maybe keeps wobbling a little bit as we figure it out, because identity is a really big part of what adoptees are searching for in life.
Definitely.
That makes sense that it would keep moving.
Yeah. And I think, as you grow older, you become less black and white about things, and living in that sort of liminal zone, as one of my counselors said.
Yes, yeah. So, another major step that you've undertaken regarding your adoption is to discharge it in the state of Victoria. What motivated you to make that decision?
It's been something in the back of my head for a while. I suppose it first began when I did meet my father for the first time in 2018. And within 2 weeks of meeting me and my family, I told him that his name was not mentioned on my birth certificate. And he said, "How do I get it put on?" Because right from meeting him, he's claim me as his daughter, probably due to a number of factors, like he never had a daughter and didn't have any grandkids. So he like jumped in boots and all. And so I said, well, I'm not sure if I can do that. So I looked at the Birth, Deaths and Marriages website, rang someone. They said, well, you'll need to get a $500 at that time DNA test that's official, not just an online one, to prove his paternity. And then once you have that, you can make application in Victoria. So I diligently forked out the money. I was quite a poor church pastor at the time, but it was important to me. Got the test back, 99.99% my father, all good. Rocked up to Birth, Deaths and Marriages with the paperwork. And then when I went there, the woman at the counter said to me right away, "You can't do that." I said, "Why not? I've been told." I've called Birth, Deaths and Marriages and they told me I could. She goes, "Well, you can't do that. Your adoption is like permanent." She goes, "I'm adopted." It's like, well, it's got nothing to do with you, whether you're adopted or not. I've been told I can do this. So after a lot of pushing, I eventually got to speak to a manager, and the manager said, yes, you can do it. And then it got processed. So that was the first step. And then I heard some more about people in Victoria and how Victoria is making it easier for adoptees to discharge. And so I heard about a lady from Cribmates who was helping adoptees write the affidavit necessary. So I got her help to write the affidavit. And at that same time, though, in Victoria, we can have the integrated birth certificate. So I applied for that because I really wanted that memorial of my adoptive parents, who, by the way, have both passed now. And also, as an only child, I had no adoptive family left, except one cousin. So I know my circumstances are quite unique, and I can understand why other adoptees would feel that's not necessary for them, and that's totally fine. It's my kind of unique situation as well playing into it. So I got the integrated birth certificate, got the affidavit ready. It submitted it in December in 2023. A social worker was uh, given my case. She gave me a couple of fairly long calls. I also said, will there be any costs? Because I feel like adoption has, been such an issue in my life that's cost me a lot. There was no cost to me. And this caseworker spent, I don't know, maybe about 5 hours in total with phone calls back and forwards, trying to get a really good understanding of my situation. And then it went to court. I did not need to show up to court. Neither of my birth parents needed to. Nobody else needed to. It was done without me there, with the testimony, I suppose, and the evidence from the caseworker. And I received a call in September 2024 that the discharge had been processed and that Births, Deaths and Marriages would be notified of it. As you can probably guess, Birth, Death and Marriages weren't, and I have written to them and no answer. But anyway, I have the official paperwork now, so I'll be back in Melbourne in April, and we'll visit them again, hopefully not traumatizing again, and show them the paperwork and actually get a copy of my original birth certificate. So that's the process. Again, it's the reason being that I have good relationships with my natural family. I have a good relationship with my sister, and both half brothers. I've told both my natural parents that I'm doing it. My mother was a little, why would you do that? I said, well, it's actually my choice to do that. But the rest of my family have been extremely supportive. My husband and kids are supportive. So, yeah, that's my journey.
Yeah. It's and I just for our listeners, the process of discharging an adoption is different in every state.
Hmm.
And likely in Tracy's circumstance, the fact her adoptive parents were deceased might have made that process a little easier. Or easier is not the right word, but you know what I mean. Go through a little with a little less difficulty.
Hmm.
And I would suggest to people if they're going through that process, I have just had my own little time with births, deaths and marriages here in Queensland. It was quite traumatic as well. And it was
Hmm.
really helpful to me to be able to ring up at Jigsaw and have a chat to someone after I'd been there. So getting some support through that process is really important too, I think. But thank you for sharing that because it is very interesting, and it can be a very clunky process in Queensland to get that. And I was surprised at how seamlessly it kind of went through for you. So
Yes.
it's very interesting for you to share that with us.
Great. I'm happy to help. And, that's always my desire to help the adoption community. And that's another reason why I went into psychology. Throughout the process of the adoption discharge, I also, I'm so aware of the importance of getting your own personal support. I had a very good therapist, actually an EMDR therapist, who helped me through that process. I had read about EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, through the book The Body Keeps the Score. And that was another factor in me going into psychology. And I'd had lots of talk therapy, but I still felt like the trauma of my adoption had not been resolved. And I was still getting triggered in my body. And a lot of that stress, too, through my work environment may well have been compounded by the fact that I hadn't dealt with that complex PTSD from my adoption, which I believe adoption is in many cases, not always. And so I had this fantastic EMDR therapist who was recommended to me by my university lecturer. And we went through several memories that had remained stuck in my brain. They felt very real to me. And so what EMDR is basically processing that memory such that it's not stuck in my emotional brain and it's triggering me in the present. Processing it with eye movements in the same way when you're in REM sleep, you process the events of the day and your eyes moved, right? Rapid eye movement. And so it's replicating that process and thinking about the memory and just talking about whatever comes up. It's not re-traumatizing such that you have to relive every detail, but the idea is that you get the learning from that traumatic memory that you need to take. And when you get that learning and when you look at it with an adult perspective, you're able to process it in your brain such that the brain moves it into long-term memory. And when memories are stored in long-term memory, all of the triggering effects in your body and all the detail around the memory dissipates, and you look back on that memory with less amount of disturbance, psychological disturbance. So I've just done the training, so it's pretty fresh in my mind. I'm starting to use it with a few clients at the moment, but yeah, EMDR is very much another reason why I'm practicing as a psychologist. And I think I like to work with clients with complex trauma, and I really think it is an amazing tool. It really has helped me a lot with processing that residual stuff that happened to me as a child that talk therapy could not. Yeah.
absolutely fascinating stuff. It really is.
Mm,
And it's so interesting that you have got to benefit from it personally and then also
yes.
have learned about it and will be practicing it in your psychology practice. Yeah.
Awesome.
So now that some time's passed since your adoption was not much time, a little bit, it was officially discharged. How has this impacted your sense of identity? Do you feel differently to before?
Yeah, I really do. I feel like I'm at a place in my life where I am fully myself. And I think, part of my adoption experience that was processed through EMDR was the fact that, my adoptive parents were good people. I did not have a difficult adoption experience at all. Like I was an only child. All of the situations surrounding my adoption was great. And when I went and got my birth records, it was like, I have no problem with being adopted. I just want to know who I am. And so I think for me, though, that's still the question mark in my mind right throughout. As soon as I got told, when I got told at the age of 4 or 5, I always used to look at people as, adoptees do. Like, I wonder what my father would look like. I used to watch shows and see men of the same age as roughly my father and go, I wonder if my dad looks like that. I wonder. And I just had that wondering right through. And I was always very good at science, but I also love doing acting and speaking and all that sort of stuff. And since finding my mother's the extrovert actor speaking. My half sister did drama, all of that. My half sister did science, and my father's a scientist, and so all those pieces of the puzzle helped make sense of who I was. And I'm not saying that reunion with your parents, is the only way to find a sense of identity. You don't need the relationship ongoing with your parents to do that, but even just if you can find as much information about the family, even through cousins or extended family, and like I said, it's not about the relationship I have with them now. It's more the knowledge has helped me at this time of life too, in midlife, where people often question what they've done and where they've been anyway. And so having that information really has helped me get to a place where I am who I wasn't sure who I was when I was finishing school and thinking about a career. And, I did a uni degree in science, but went the church way. But, if I stuck with that uni degree, I probably would have become a doctor. I probably would have worked in health. But it's so fascinating. This is why I talk about the universe. I don't know. I've ended up like my placement was at a pain management clinic, and I have just been offered a job in pain management, which is about as close as you can get to being a doctor as a psychologist as you can get. But hey, then you got all the trauma stuff because they say trauma is related to chronic pain. And so that's fascinating. So, and I think moving away from the church, I Christianity at a time when I didn't know who I was provided a template for me to make sense of my world. And so I'm not dissing that stage of my life at all. It was kind of what I needed. I needed some stability, like who the hell I am. And, the very fundamentalist frame tells you how the world works and how you are, and gives you identity and gives you a sense of community as well, which was something I was missing as well. Like I was an only child and all of that. And so I'm not dissing that stage of my life. I'm not dissing the career I had before the career I have now. It's all kind of worked together to bring me to this point now in my life. But I do feel whole. I do feel like I'm living my best life now in what I'm doing in my career, and being okay with the fact I'm an extrovert because my mother's a raging extrovert. And I always thought I was an introvert because my adoptive mother was an introvert, right? And so all those little pieces has brought me to the place where now I'm just, that's resolved. And the discharge too, for me, kind of put a nail in the coffin. Like that period of my life is now gone. for me, such that I can move forwards for how many years I have left. Yeah.
Fascinating. It really is. Um, I'm just thinking about what you were saying about Christianity and providing that framework, and it reminds me of my younger self in that I always kind of wanted people, I kind of allowed people to frame my life, and I
Mm.
always wanted someone to fix something for me or put things in
Mm.
place or provide the path. And it was only, in the last maybe 10 or 15 years that I've started to really shake all of that off and started to work towards it. And I do
Mm.
feel in life that when you're opening the right doors, other doors keep opening. And when you're
Yes.
not on the right path, doors keep closing and life gets difficult. When you're
Yeah.
on the right path, it gets a lot easier. And that's
Yeah,
the
definitely.
thing that told me I'm on the right path because things were getting easier.
Yes, most definitely. It's good insight, Joe.
The world of wisdom, according to Joe Sparrow. So, what's next for you, both personally and professionally? Are there any projects or areas of focus that you're particularly excited about?
I'm excited because this week I've started now in the pain managed clinic at the hospital, the PN hospital, and I've just booked into a conference in Melbourne with the pain management um, society or whatever about chronic pain, and some of those seminars are about chronic pain and trauma. So I think that's definitely something I'm interested in exploring. Um, one of the main reasons I did go into psychology was to see adopted people or people impacted by adoption, whether it be, parents, natural parents, adoptive parents, or adoptees, or even foster kids. I've not yet had a client in that area. And maybe, like you said, things are being held off until all of my processing and my trauma has been like kind of dealt with, such that I can be in the room with that person and hold whatever they bring to me, with that objectivity. But I am looking forward to doing that. So, and using EMDR. Actually, there's two therapies I feel very effective, have been very effective for me. EMDR is one, maybe three. Another is internal family systems therapy, which talks about our psyche being as in parts, not as a whole, and the child part, and that's been really good for me, and I want to keep growing in my skills in that so that I can, because it often goes very well with EMDR. So I want to keep growing in that, but also using that as a therapeutic tool. And also, I found that extremely good. And that's very good for anxiety, which I think a lot of adoptees, including myself, have.
Can you just tell
It's
us what
about
that was, that last thing you said, because you did freeze a little bit. So,
Okay, acceptance and commitment therapy, so otherwise known as ACT.
yes.
So it's about diffusing from your thoughts, not allowing your brain to bully you with the thoughts, accepting um, things as they are, dropping the struggle, but also using mindfulness to stay in the present. I found that personally, I connect with that better being an adoptee than cognitive behavioral therapy. I find cognitive behavioral therapy, although it's very effective and some parts of it are very effective, I at times find it invalidating of the client. It's like, well, just change your thoughts and you will feel better. It's like, it's a lot more complex than that. They're the three therapies I look forward to integrating and using with clients. But ultimately, it's about the client, what they need, and the therapeutic alliance. And so that's kind of still a lot of growing to do. I may write a book one day about my experience. Like I mentioned, I went to Elizabeth Gilbert's workshop and have just read her book, Big Magic. which talks about creativity. I'm getting more in touch with my creative side at the moment because I've kind of let that go as well. And so during the EMDR workshop, I processed on the fact that I'm always struggling and trying to be a perfectionist as a psychologist. And I think that's a bit of a trauma response. But I reprocessed to I'm enough. I know enough now. I just need to be myself in the room with my client and connect that way. So now I'm looking forward to being less stressed because study's over, less of a perfectionist and more creative, I suppose. So that's ahead and seeing whatever clients come my way. Yeah.
Brilliant. So for adoptees who are considering searching for their families or possibly discharging their adoption or seeking mental health services, what advice would you give?
Um, my advice is first and foremost, as an adopted person, I really do think we need to process our adoption experience with a therapist. I'd never had therapy until I found my natural father through DNA testing in 2018, but I've found it incredibly helpful in my journey. Um, and we talk about mental health, right? So I don't like the term disorder. I actually don't like the concept of the DSM, and we tell people that they're disordered. I like the concept of that it's more about not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, which is another amazing book I would recommend adopted people read. It's written by Dr. Bruce Perry, and Oprah Winfrey has had some part in that. And it's about that's how I see mental health. That's how I see counseling and therapy. And so I would suggest, there's a right therapist for everyone. There's also I've had a numerous therapists. I don't think it's because I'm ADHD. I just think maybe it is. I just think it's because certain therapists have helped me at certain times. So when I was, struggling with my beliefs about Christianity and all of that, I had a therapist who had been a church pastor herself, and she could relate to my journey. So that was one of the first I had. The very first I had did acceptance and commitment therapy, and that was particularly good for me at that stage due to my anxiety. And then, I had another one over COVID who was very good at, again, an ex church person who was a clinical social worker, and she helped me with issues with my marriage, my identity, and also leaving the church. And then right now, the EMDR therapist has been particularly good well, it has been brilliant at processing my childhood trauma. So therapy is not necessarily sticking with the one therapist with the one modality. Every therapist is different. It's because of who they are, their life experience. And when I first walked into clinic at our university, I was very stressed. It's like, I don't know enough about all these therapies. It's like, which therapy should I use? And he said to me, such words of wisdom, just be you. Like 70% or more of the effects of therapy has been shown to be the therapist, the therapist themselves. And that took a whole heap of pressure off me. And so I've had clients come in and often they say they didn't gel with their previous therapist. And I say in my first session, this is a test for us getting to know each other, how we get on with each other. Please tell me if you feel I'm not the right therapist for you. And I will not take that personally because a lot of working through this stuff is super hard and you need to do it with a person that you have confidence in and that you're able to relate and feel comfortable and feel safe with. So, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Tracy, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your updates on your life and your adoption experience with us. It's been an absolute privilege to hear your story, and I'm sure it's going to resonate with many of our listeners.
Great, Jo. Thanks.
And for anyone tuning in, remember that every adoption experience is unique and it's never too late to begin your own journey of exploration. And if you're looking for more resources, support, or simply a space to share, Jigsaw Queensland is here to help. If you'd like to support the podcast, leave us a review, share the podcast, or let us know what you think by emailing or calling us, because we love to hear from you. And if you have a story that you'd like to share with us and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. I'm having trouble getting my words out. Note that Adopt Perspective can be and is listened to by people all over the world. I'm Jo Sparrow. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you're calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.